So I know you're probably thinking, what exactly is Exploitative Mahjong? As the name suggests, Exploitative Mahjong means that you're exploiting certain tendencies that your opponents have. Here's what I think. If you're playing any game, you should be trying your best to win. After all, you play to win the game. In order to do that, you should make use of all the information available to you. Most players only look at the information here, or maybe sometimes here, to check whether a tile is tsumogiri or tadashi. But actually, everything you do at the mahjong table conveys information, and every player has certain tendencies that you can pick up on if you observe carefully. In poker, there's a concept called GTO, which stands for Game Theory Optimal. It's basically the perfect way to play your hand at any given point, according to a computer. But there's also another concept in poker called exploitative play, where you focus on identifying weaknesses in your opponent's strategies and then taking advantage of them. For example, without getting too technical, if your opponent tends to fold too often, you can consider deviating from perfect GTO play and betting more often with a wider range of hands and bluffs. Similarly, in mahjong, there's always the computer-approved way to play every hand, but there are also situations where you can deviate from this if you're aware of certain players' tendencies. In fact, this is something I don't think many strategy books delve into or even mention. So far, I've only seen one strategy book that actually talks about this. In fact, some of the pointers in this video are actually from that book, and I think it's actually really interesting to talk about it on a deeper level. Also, I have to add a disclaimer that this is more applicable to real-life mahjong, where you have played with your opponents more than once, and not really applicable to online mahjong. Let's get started. Most players tend to arrange their tiles in numerical order from left to right, and they tend to arrange their hand by suits. Knowing this, when tiles flow out from their hand, the position of the tiles that they show is something that can be very easily exploited. For example, if a player discards 4p from their leftmost tile like this usually indicates that they do not have 1p, 2p, or 3p in their hand. This is because they tend to arrange the pinzu from left to right, and their leftmost tile is 4p. That means that this is the lowest pinzu tile in his hand. Knowing this can come in useful later. For example, if that same player declares Vichy, you can discard tiles like 1p and 2p, knowing that he does not have surrounding tiles in his hand. In another example, if a player discards 1p from his hand and it is the 5th tile from the left in his hand, you know that the first 4 tiles are not pinzu tiles. The way players meld their hand can also give off a lot of information. For example, if a player cheats a 5s with a 4s and 6s like this usually indicates that he has 2 more 5s in his hand. It will be a good idea to preempt the chi by arranging 4s and 6s together, such that when you do chi, it will hide the fact that you have 2 more 5s in your hand. This can be useful in situations where, for example, the 5s is the Dora, and you want to try and conceal the strength of your hand. If a player keeps a lone tile at the edge after a call, it usually means that they are not in tenpai yet, but ishanten. The lone tile is usually the tile that they will cut in order to reach tenpai. If a player melts their hand, and after the melt, they throw a tile that is the 3rd tile from either edge of their hand, the chance of them having a yakuhai pair increases. This is because most players tend to keep their yakuhai and yakuhai pairs at the edges of their hands. So, if they are left-handed, it may be on the left edge instead. If a player declares Vichy and throws the tile from the right edge of their hand, or left edge if they are left-handed, you know that it's probably not a headless shape. This is because players tend to keep their least useful tile at the edge. For example, if you have headless shapes like this, which are waiting on 6-9s, you will tend not to keep the lone tile to the right yet, because there's still a chance you can pair up your lone tile for pinfu. In this case, the lone tile here is the 2s. However, if the rest of your blocks are fixed, like this, then you may tend to put the tile that you definitely don't need on the edge of your hand. Aside from the way they arrange their hand, the time that players take to make a decision also reveals a lot about their hand. If you've ever played mahjong in real life, you will definitely have seen at least 1 or 2 of these instances before. If the player before them has just discarded a tile and they think for very long, it usually means that they are thinking about whether to meld that tile, and therefore they are not in tenpai yet. This is because if they are in tenpai, they will know their weight and won't need to think for so long. Therefore, if they tsumogiri the next tile, you know that they are still not in tenpai, and as a result, you can take this chance to discard your dangerous tiles. However, there is one exception to this, and that is if they are doing honitsu or chinitsu hands. If you suspect that their entire hand is made out of the same suit, then it's possible that when they hesitate, they might already be in tenpai, but they are trying to figure out if they can win off the tile that was already discarded. When declaring Richie, the time taken before the Richie is declared also reveals a lot about their hand. If they Richie without any hesitation, the hand tends to be average. However, if they retreat with some hesitation, it usually polarizes their hand range to either really strong hands or really weak hands. For example, if you have a pinful 1 Dora hand, it will be an instant retreat and you won't need to think twice. However, if you have a hand that is just retreat Nomi, then you might spend a little more time thinking about whether to declare retreat. The same applies if you have hands that are already very strong. For example, a Mangan hand that becomes a Hanuman after you retreat, then you might hesitate for a while longer before deciding whether or not to declare retreat. When someone makes a call and then pauses to frantically check the discard pools, they are more likely to be on a tanky wait, and they are trying to decide which is the best tanky tile to wait on. This video is definitely not a conclusive guide, but I hope it at least introduces you to this idea, so you can start thinking about it more when playing with others in real life. Of course, there can be other things you may notice when playing against specific opponents. Maybe their posture will change when they have a good hand or when they're in 10-pie. Maybe they push more tiles when they are tilted. Maybe they tend to draw the tile more slowly, or they like to feel the tile when they are in 10-pie. Maybe their calls become louder when they have a bigger hand. Either way, I would encourage you to keep a lookout for these things, because any information you get from other players is something that you can use to your advantage. However, at the same time, don't go overboard trying to camouflage your tells. Don't be that guy who takes 20 seconds on every turn because he doesn't want to give off timing tells. Also, keep in mind that having good etiquette is still important, especially if you're playing in a tournament setting. Anyway, I hope you found this video interesting, and thanks for watching.